At the beginning of the 13th century, Seti I, the pharaoh of the new kingdom of Egypt, raised thousands of soldiers and headed to the kingdom of Amurru to regain his influence in this region. Seti conquered certain coastal cities and successfully conquered Canaan. The Hittite Empire, which at this time represented the greatest Egyptian rival, stood up to protect its vassals. However, Seti, personally leading his army, defeated the Hittites and achieved great success by expanding his borders to Kadesh and subjugating the Amurru kingdom. After this great victory, he and his son, Ramses II, triumphantly entered the city of Kadesh. After these successes, Seti withdrew with the majority of his army. The military garrisons he left behind were tasked with controlling the newly conquered territories. But they were not strong enough to resist Hittite incursions. Consequently, Kadesh, Canaan, and Amurru soon fell under the influence of the Hittites again. Seti did not live long after this, and after his death he was succeeded by his son, Ramses II. But the young pharaoh's path to greatness was by no means predetermined. And if you too want to experience the forming of your own empire, you can do just that with the sponsor of today's video, Rise of Kingdoms, the free cross-platform strategy game with over 100 million players worldwide. Experience the thrill of playing on the same battle scene with thousands of players at the same time, and use the skills of your commanders to turn the tide of the battle. You can choose from 13 historical civilizations, recruit hundreds of historical generals, train special soldiers, collect resources, develop technology, advance to the next era, and build your own dream city. Moreover, the game's built-in social system allows you to form alliances with players from around the world, and together you can farm, destroy barbarians, take part in kingdom battles, discuss commander builds, and rule the world. Best yet, Rise of Kingdoms will soon release its latest civilization, Egypt, in mid-June, which means you will be able to take on the ancient world with Egypt's historical troops and sophistically designed heroes. Download the game using the link below and use the gift code to get incredible resources. By participating in in-game community events, new and current players will have the chance to win a round-trip ticket to Egypt. Rule the world in Rise of Kingdoms. In 1275 BC, Ramses II launched the first Syrian campaign, in which Egypt renewed its influence in Canaan, and feeling directly threatened, Amurru also recognized the authority of Egypt. Thus, Ramses managed to return the borders of his state to those lines that were previously drawn by his father. Only the city of Kadesh remained beyond his reach. So the following year, 1274 BC, Ramses embarked on great preparations to attack the Hittite state again and establish military domination in Syria. On the other hand, at the beginning of his reign, King Muwatallis II moved his capital from Hattusa to Tarhun Tasha, and according to one theory, he did it to bring the center of the country closer to Syria, and thus to pay more attention to clashes with Egypt. During his reign, he was busy fighting with other surrounding peoples and could not devote himself to the southern question. However, just at the time of Ramses' attack, the situation on other fronts relatively calmed down, and Muwatallis also raised a huge army and headed south. The Hittite king gathered around him many allies, while Ramses II, in addition to his men, also recruited mercenary troops. One of the most important mercenaries was the Nerin detachment, which came from Canaan. Sherden troops were also present within the Egyptian army, and many others. Ramses in May 1274 BC arrived near Kadesh, and after hearing from two Shasu nomads that the Hittite king was frightened by the pharaoh's army and had remained near today's Aleppo, he and the Ammon division decided to take up a convenient position near Kadesh as soon as possible, where they set up a camp. His other units, Ra, Seth, and Ptah, were located a little further south, and were also moving towards Kadesh. His plan was to capture the city after the rest of his troops arrived, while the Hittite army was still far away. Pharaoh's forces numbered about 16,000 infantry and 2,000 war chariots that could carry out quick maneuvers and attacks on enemies' rear and flanks. Shortly after Ramesses set up a camp, Egyptian scouts brought 2 Hittite prisoners before the pharaoh. After a short interrogation, Ramesses learned that instead of near Aleppo, the Hittite army was encamped just a few kilometers northeast. This news alarmed the Egyptian pharaoh, and at that moment he realized that the intelligence gathered about the frightened Hittite king was just misinformation spread by enemy spies. Led by King Muwatallis, the Hittite army had 15,000 infantry, which was slightly less than the Egyptian infantry. But the Hittites had a huge advantage in the number of chariots, which probably numbered as many as 10,000. In addition, the Hittite chariots were much heavier than the Egyptian ones, and beside doing quick maneuvers, they could also carry out fierce charges on infantry and quickly disperse their formation. Realizing the situation, Pharaoh sent his vizier to hasten the arrival of reinforcements from the south. During that time, a group of Hittite chariots crossed the Orontes River, probably to reconnoiter the Egyptian army and their position. At that moment, the Ra division was gradually approaching the camp, so this group of Hittite chariots decided to attack these troops before they could unite with the Ammon division. This was followed by a charge of Hittite chariots on the center of the Egyptian division of Ra. Unable to organize the fighting order, the Ra division suffered heavy losses at the very beginning of the battle, and then the entire division found itself on the run and in disarray. With this, about 2,000 Hittite war chariots completely defeated almost the entire Ra division, which numbered about 5,000 men. Only a small contingent, part of the divisional chariots, successfully made their way towards Pharaoh's camp in the north. This left Ramesses completely cut off from the rest of his army, with only 1 division under his command. After a brief pursuit of the defeated Egyptians, this Hittite group reorganized and continued to advance north. Seeing the situation at the front, Ramesses quickly organized the defense of his camp so that the Ammon division would not suffer the same fate. The Hittite chariots soon launched a new fierce charge. This time, the Egyptian infantry received the fight in an organized manner, but the heavy chariots were still superior to the infantry. As the Hittites broke through into Ramesses' camp, their attack weakened as they became trapped among the Egyptian infantry and the obstacles inside the camp, leaving them unable to maneuver, which had by now been the key to their success. Seeing that the enemy attack was waning, Ramesses gathered around the chariots from the Ammon division, as well as those who survived from the Ra division. He prayed to the god Ammon. Then, he personally led the army, launching a fierce counterattack. Egyptian chariots came out of the camp and rushed into the back of the Hittite forces, inflicting heavy losses on them with a rain of arrows. During this time, the Hittite king Muwatallis watched the battle with the rest of his army. Due to the great distance, he probably could not send his infantry as reinforcements because they would not arrive in time to join the battle, which left 15,000 of his men completely useless. So he readied the rest of the chariots around him in preparation to attack. Meanwhile, the Hittite chariots, which were in a very difficult position, began to retreat towards the Orontes River. They were followed by the faster Egyptian light chariots, suffering heavy losses during the pursuit. As the Egyptian chariots chased the Hittite defeated troops, only the pharaoh's weary infantry remained in the camp. Then, from the east, a new wave of Muwatallis' fresh chariots struck the Egyptian camp again. Thousands of Hittite chariots overran the infantry of the Ammon division. Unable to fight against a stronger opponent, it was only a matter of time before the Egyptians would give in and start a general retreat. However, at this very critical moment, the near-in troops joined the battle from the north, arriving at the right moment from the Amurru kingdom. Their appearance completely surprised the Hittite army. This marked the beginning of an even bloodier phase of the battle. As much as they tried, the Hittites could not finish off the Egyptian forces. Soon Ramesses returned from the pursuit with the chariots and pressed the Hittites from the south, while the Egyptian Ptah division had almost reached the battlefield. To avoid being completely surrounded, the Hittite forces set out to retreat towards their camp. In the ensuing chaos, many soldiers abandoned their chariots to cross and reach the other bank of the river. This ended the Battle of Kadesh. Even though the Egyptians managed to stop the Hittite attacks, their own losses were enormous. Almost the entire Ra division was destroyed, and the Ammon division suffered heavy losses. Although the Seth and Ptah divisions did not arrive in time to join the battle, and their troops remained completely intact, the Egyptian losses were nevertheless too great for Ramesses to continue the fight. The Hittites, on the other hand, also suffered heavy losses, but they still had 15,000 infantry and several thousand more chariots ready to engage in combat. Realizing the situation, Pharaoh Ramesses gave up on continuing the operation and headed back to his country. After the battle, Ramesses II tried to present this campaign as his victory, while the Hittites considered that they had successfully stopped the Egyptian attack on Kadesh. Whatever the case, the Hittite king Muwatallis invaded the territory of Ramses II after the battle and took control of some areas. It was this clash in late May of 1274 BC that ensured Kadesh and Amora remained firmly under Hittite control. Hostilities resumed a few years later. This time Ramesses fared better and was able to broker more favorable terms in 1259. Under the new peace treaty, the Egyptians and Hittites agreed to aid each other against external attacks or internal rebellions. The alliance was meant to last forever. And while the conflict did subside, both kingdoms entered a period of decline and would never regain the power that they once held. If you stayed around this far, thank you for watching. And if you'd like to support our work like all these amazing people do, head over to our Patreon page where you can get ad-free early access to our videos for as little as $1. Or you can support us by clicking like and subscribing to our channel and leaving a comment as a sacrifice to the gods of the algorithm. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.